Star Trek The Next Generation changed television forever. It was very successful in syndication, paving the way for other sci-fi shows in syndication. Hercules, Xena, War of the Worlds, Superboy, and the first new seasons of Babylon 5 all gained success as syndicated shows after TNG. And doing a new version of an older show, which Star Trek did first, also caught on with the other sci-fi shows like Battlestar Galactica and Doctor Who. Of course, audiences still complain that nothing new ever comes out of Hollywood, but bringing back the classics, when done right, can be a wonderful thing. Later on, when all the Star Trek TV shows and movies were referred to as a franchise, it was the first time the word franchise was used to describe a TV show and its offshoots. David Gerrold had a monthly column in Starlog magazine reporting on TNG before it came out. He was one of the writers on the show during the first season. David is the one who wrote the scene where Picard first talks to Riker, in which Picard mentions Riker's refusal to let his previous captain beam down on an away mission. I remember reading this in Starlog and thinking, this scene shows that the characters could be edgier than before. Well, maybe they didn't quite stay that way, but it was a good start. Riker not wanting Picard to do away missions became one of the staples of the show. It was one of the things that David Gerrold had previously discussed in his 1970s book, The World of Star Trek, that the captain should not be the one beaming down into dangerous situations all the time. TNG was considered a hit after one season, even though, looking back, the first season pales in comparison to the later seasons. From what I read in interviews with Gene Roddenberry, it was a risky move putting the show in syndication instead of trying to sell it to a network. It had to be sold to independent TV stations who would show it on a different day and time in each area. So the only way you could know when it was on was to check your local listings in TV Guide or the Sunday paper. Remember, this was 1987, pre-internet, plus it meant they would have a lower budget. But as Gene said, the original series flourished in syndication, not while it was on a network, which was a good indicator that this series would have a good chance. Oh, and when I say, quote, the original series, unquote, of course that refers to the original Star Trek. When The Next Generation started, I remember hearing people stammer when deciding what to say when referring to the old, quote-unquote, Star Trek. Worse, what to call the old actors. I remember seeing Nichelle Nichols at a con and hearing her say that she did not want to be called an old actor. So finally the media came up with the term the original series, or the abbreviated form TOS, and that stuck. The term the original series was invented for Star Trek, so to me it can only refer to Star Trek. When the Battlestar Galactica reboot came on, I heard people call the old Battlestar Galactica the original series. I was like, no. Even though I love Battlestar Galactica, the phrase original series refers to Star Trek and only Star Trek. I remember when TNG started in the fall of 1987. I was in college living in a dorm. In that area, it came on Sunday night at 11 o'clock. Obviously, the local station didn't think much of it. Some TV exec must have said, "We'll buy the show, but let's put it on at an out-of-the-way time when nobody watches TV." But I stayed up and watched it every Sunday night. I preferred to go to bed at that time, but in another way it was convenient because no one would be asking me to go out to eat or see a movie that late on a Sunday night. So I could be in my room by myself. I had a private room that year, and I didn't know anyone else who wanted to watch it with me, and happily watch Star Trek. Imagine seeing Q for the first time, a godlike being who didn't like humanity at all. He was a much better character later on when he had a sense of humor. I would never have guessed from the beginning that he would grow to be one of my favorite Star Trek characters. Star Trek, of course, wasn't dead before TNG. The Trek movies had been doing well. Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, was a huge hit in 1986, and TNG premiered the following year in 1987. So for Trek, a new series might have seemed like a natural progression. You know, I wouldn't have minded seeing the original actors come back in a new weekly show. But, you know, they are aging, and TV shows want younger stars. Wait, Patrick Stewart wasn't exactly a spring chicken. That was another, as I've read in interviews with Gene Roddenberry, risky move. Casting a man who's not only more mature but also bald didn't fit the bill of your typical leading man. I'm so glad that Gene and producer Rick Berman chose to go with Patrick Stewart. I think they saw that his acting ability and charisma were enough to carry the show. And besides, they had Riker to be the handsome leading man type. But I'm sure even Gene and Rick were surprised by how popular Patrick became. Patrick Stewart actually did become the male sex symbol of the show. What can I say? Captain Picard was a great leader, a man of compassion, and yet a man of great inner strength and dignity. He could be a good leader without being stale or militaristic. If you go back and look at Patrick Stewart's work before TNG, such as David Lynch's film Dune, you'll see he was always a great actor. It's like he was destined for the role of Picard and the fame it brought to him. Michael Dorn at a con once referred to Patrick by saying, "He's God." That pretty much sums it up. He'll even be coming back, starring in his own series on CBS. Remember hearing his voice for the first time, doing the opening monologue? Space, the final frontier. Oh, that voice. Star Trek, The Next Generation, a continuation of Trek. A representation of the best that Trek can be. It brought many new fans to the franchise, and still does. It will live on forever. I remember 7 years ago looking for Star Trek groups on Facebook and only finding one that had any kind of following. Now Star Trek on social media has exploded. My Facebook and Twitter feeds are practically nothing but Trek news, Trek memes, Trek ideas, Trek musings, and the like. I just wanted to mention a couple of things worth noting for your entertainment. There's a Facebook group called The Same Photo of Chief O'Brien Every Day. So it's a publicity shot of Chief O'Brien in his DS9 uniform, smiling with his hands on his hips. The admin posts the same picture every day with a different post. One of the posts says, "The great thing about being on Deep Space Nine is that if you tell people you think your lamp is spying on you, it could be true." I swear I heard that familiar Odo harumph coming from it. And then another quote that went with the picture, "There was a time when people on the Enterprise were being abducted and experimented on by these strange aliens. I'm not saying I wish I was one of the people who had their limbs cut off and reattached, but it would have been nice to be considered." And remember just a few weeks ago when everyone was doing that 10-year Facebook challenge? They posted 2 pictures of O'Brien side by side, the same picture, so hey, he didn't change. Who would have thought that you could build a Facebook page around the single repeated picture of a character who was mostly considered boring, or it's just so absurd that it actually works? And moving on, there's a Twitter page called Star Trek Comics Minus Context. They post a single panel or maybe 2 panels from a Star Trek comic. One example is a picture of Spock naked and in pain, and the dialogue balloon coming from a Borg says, "Assimilation unsuccessful." Some are serious like that. Some of the panels are just hilarious. Another one is Odo with his hands shaped like a baby's toy rattle and saying, "Okay, okay, I'm shaking them." And then there's one of Bashir saying, "Isn't it obvious? She wants to breastfeed." And the panel next to it is Jadzia with a smile on her face. All you avid Trek comic readers would have fun guessing which comic goes with which one. It's definitely a visual medium, so check it out. And just one more thing, I found a book on Amazon called Autographs of the Final Frontier. According to the Amazon description, the book has over 450 autographs, plus over 500 rare behind-the-scenes photos, $15.95 on Kindle. Can you believe the prime paperback is $66? It has 480 pages, and it was published back in 2018. Has signatures from guest stars and staff members and handwritten notes. I downloaded the free sample of it, and it actually looks very interesting. A lot of interesting photos that have never been seen before, and a few little tidbits about the actors and about the photos. So check it out. I am the Honorable Kavura.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.